Hey fantasy fans, welcome back. It's Dan here with TreeBeard Book Reviews, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite books of all time is The Hobbit, and I'm going to be specifically talking about the audiobook narration by Andy Serkis. So let's get into it. The Hobbit. I really love The Hobbit. The Hobbit's one of my favorite books, as I mentioned. And I read this in the month of April. I did the audiobook version with Andy Serkis, and it's absolutely fan-flipping-tastic, guys. There was a big Audible sale a few days, I guess it was a few weeks ago now, where all these fantasy books were on sale. And I was just like, okay, what do I pick? Strategically pick. And I saw that all these Andy Serkis, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and the full Lord of the Rings. I was like, yeah, these are mine, thank you. I got them all pretty much for the price of what one would cost. So let me just talk about, is this worth buying? The answer is yes. Obviously, it's a no-brainer that it's worth buying. But let me kind of talk about why, and why, Andy Serkis, even though he's well known for the voice of Gollum, why he just did such a fantastic job. This isn't perfect. There are going to be things I'm going to complain about. But, I think it's the overall experience was better than I actually expected. So I will say some of the things for this that I noticed. It was actually better to listen at a slower speed. Even though Andy Serkis, he can be a bit of a quick speaker, I find I usually typically listen at 1.7, 1.8, depending on the narrator. And I found with this one, I was actually listening at like 1.2, 1.3, where it was just faster than, the normal speed. But it was enough that you kind of get the richness of his voice, because sometimes when you speed up an audiobook, you lose a little bit of that character. And I find with this, I just completely just dropped into Middle Earth with Andy Serkis, because he has such a clear, distinct voice for a lot of the troop. Bilbo, his voice for Bilbo was great. This very soft, passive, homey, warm, comforting voice. When he was speaking in the voice of Bilbo, you felt like just a little fat little hobbit, where you wanted a pipe of tobacco, and you wanted to be eating tea and biscuits, and you didn't want to be running off on an adventure. But then it also had that like little heart on that smoldering ember that is Bilbo Baggins, and that little bit of charisma that's there. And it's amazing how he captured that in his voice. So really liked how he did that. And then obviously there are the dwarves. He does distinct voices for some of the dwarves, like more of the well-known ones who are a bit more prominent in the book, like Thorin, Balin. I think like Dory, or I think Dory is the one who's probably the most prominent with Bilbo, and then Fili Kili, just because they're relatives of Thorin Oakenshield. Their voices were really good. They were very distinct. You knew when Thorin was speaking. You knew when Balin was speaking. You knew when Dwalin was speaking. So I did really like that. So one of the things for me was the pronunciation of Oin and Gloin. I've always pronounced it that way. I've read Lord of the Rings several times. I've read The Hobbit several times. I've actually done a few different audiobook listens of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and it's always been Oin and Gloin. And Andy Serkis chose to pronounce it as Owen and Glowin, and I was just like, what? Like, what? So that threw me off. Their names aren't mentioned overly much, but it was still like, when he said it, it was just like kind of like sandpaper on like my ears when he's like Owen and Glowin. I was like, oh, bro, come on. That was a little minor negative. That was probably some of the minor, like it's very like nitpicky, but it did kind of pull me out of the story sometimes when I was listening to it. So that was one. I will say he has a beautiful singing voice, and Tolkien is famous for some of his songs and his poetry, and or the songs that are meant to be sung, and he does a great job at singing them. Like fa la 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 lee, all into the valley, like where there's like obviously the Misty Mountains Cold. So there's some great songs that he does. He does a really fantastic job of that. It's well worth it just to hear him sing them. Some of them he's a little pitchy in, but hey, I'm not the perfect singer. Like, I'm pitchy too, but I still belt him out. Like, it was great. It was a lot of fun. So the next things I want to talk about, obviously, are the three big characters that you are probably all excited for when reading The Hobbit or listening to The Hobbit, and that is Gandalf, Gollum, and Smaug. So, Gandalf, does he nail Gandalf? Yes, he does this very deep, like throaty voice for Gandalf, and it's so powerful, his voice that he does for Gandalf. And I really liked, this Gandalf's voice is actually the most, his voice for Gandalf was the most impressive for me during one of my favorite scenes in the whole book. So this guys, this is probably going to be spoiler free for The Hobbit. The Hobbit's like 75 years old. It's an old book. Like, it's older than that now, because this is a 75th anniversary edition. And so it's an old book. So one of my favorite parts of the whole story is when they're going to Beorn's house. I love Beorn's house. It just sounds so cozy and cool. Beorn is the guy I would love to hang out with. Just because I picture him as just a big jolly, well, maybe not jolly, he's a bit grumpy, but he's a big guy with beard, and he's got beehives, and he can transform into a bear. But I love the narration that goes on in this story with how he's, Gandalf is kind of tricking Beorn into, letting the dwarves come onto his estate by getting him interested in the tale he's telling. But he just has a fantastic voice. There's little nuances within Gandalf's voice that he does that are just excellent. It's fantastic. It's great. So the next thing I want to talk about is Gollum. So everyone knows Andy Serkis is well known for being Gollum in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So you expect him to be fantastic here, and he is. You're waiting the whole book for him to get to Gollum. Because Riddles in the Dark is one of the best chapters written in probably all fantasy history. It's so iconic. It's so engaging. You feel the fear of Bilbo, but there's this game of wits, and it's great. Where you have this pure, wholesome character against this slimy, dark creature. And, Serkis with his voice of Gollum, you just have this giant shit-eating grin on your... I did. I know I did. I had this giant shit-eating grin on my face when I was listening to Riddles in the Dark. But, he has this voice of Gollum where he captures the pain that is Gollum. Like, even though he's bound to this ring, he's tortured by this ring, he loves it and hates it as much, obviously, as he loves and hates himself. And I just think Serkis captures that beautifully with his voice. So I won't, you have to... Because if you guys seen the Hobbit movies, nobody cared about who was playing Smaug. Yes, it's cool that Benedict Cumberbatch or whatever his name was, like Smaug, but everyone wanted to see Andy Serkis do Riddles in the Dark. And again, it doesn't disappoint. I would just go back and listen to that chapter. It's chapter 5 for anyone who doesn't know. It's chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark. I guess we'll talk about Smaug. Smaug's voice. Oh, it's so good. He's very good at doing this very menacing, ominous dragon. Like, Smaug is impressive. His voice is impressive. And he's meant to be immense. And, it's just... I could see Andy Serkis just being exhausted after doing this audiobook because, it's got to take a lot out of him, because I felt exhausted, not listening to it, but just overwhelmed, where I'm like, wow, this is what an audiobook performance should be. So where, you feel the power of the character through their voice, because it's... And then just maintaining that voice, maintaining that level of consistency. I really enjoyed it. He's just does such a masterful job. And I actually can't wait for him to do Small Gods for Discworld, because that's going to be amazing. So anyways, guys, let's kind of get to the overall rating for The Hobbit. Like I said, The Hobbit's like, I don't know how many times I read The Hobbit. It's got to be a dozen. It's got to be a dozen times I've read it. It's a fantastic book just to read. Read to either a young child, or read it for yourself for the first time if you haven't. But if you're on the fence about getting this Audible version, do not. Just get it just for the sheer enjoyment, or get it and read along with it. Like, read your book while Andy Serkis is doing the voices, because it just does so much to your headcanon. Like, it's amazing how much a voice can change how you picture a character in your head. And that's what I think he did a really good job of, cementing some characters in my mind, because I know who Bilbo Baggins is. I know who Gandalf is. who Gandalf is, and I know what they look like. And his voices just went to reaffirming that type of headcanon for me. The Hobbit, narrated by Andy Serkis, is nothing but stunning. It is fantastic, guys. It's worth every penny. If you even, it's worth buying at full price. I got lucky and I bought it on sale, but I wouldn't hesitate recommending you buy it at full price. So really, that's it for me, guys. If you guys like the channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, we'll see you next time. Cheers.